Sensory information travels from sensory receptors to the spinal cord and brain through the peripheral nervous system. Sensory receptors themselves are modified neurons. Sensory receptors receive information from either inside your body or outside your body. So sensory receptors can detect light energy outside your body, or it can detect things like pain inside your body. Whenever a sensory receptor is stimulated, it causes a change in the nervous system. So it basically stimulates the nervous system, which sends action potentials to the brain, and then the brain processes and integrates the information to make you aware of what the sensation is. Now, there's actually a difference between sensation and perception. Sensation is where a stimulus stimulates a sensory receptor, and perception is when the brain processes that information and you may become consciously aware of that stimulus. So the reason why this is different is because even if multiple people are experiencing the same stimulus, sometimes their brain processes it in a different way, and so their perceptions may be different. There are also instances where a sensation or a stimulus is so weak that it may not be perceived. So, for example, some people can hear sounds at a lower volume than other people. The sensation is still there, but the people that are consciously aware of the sound are perceiving the sound, whereas people that are not consciously aware of the sound are not perceiving it. Sensation has to occur in order for perception to occur. And the stimulus has to reach a certain threshold to trigger an action potential in the sensory nervous system. So that's why your threshold may be different than your neighbor's threshold. So that's why your neighbor might be able to hear certain sounds that you can't hear or see. I'm not going to play the videos in this video here, but I recommend that you go back to the actual PowerPoint and play these videos because it's kind of trippy. It's going to make you, or it's going to help you understand the difference between sensation and perception. And they're kind of fun to do with another person. So if you've got a family member around, it's kind of fun to watch it to see if your perception of the same stimulus is different. I have one video on sensation and perception with your eyes, and one on sensation and perception with your ears. Now there are multiple different types of sensory receptors, and the different receptors detect different stimuli. So some examples include free nerve endings. These are dendrites of specialized neurons that are embedded in tissue, and these are typically found in tissues like the skin. These include things like pain receptors and thermoreceptors, which detect temperature changes. Some sensory receptors have an encapsulated ending, which means that the dendrites are encased in a connective tissue structure. So both of these, the free nerve endings and the encapsulated nerve endings, tend to be in some of the same areas, like the skin. They just work a little differently from each other. And then we have some special senses that have specialized neurons that react to different types of stimuli. So our special senses include vision, smell, taste, hearing, and balance, which is also called equilibrium. And so their sensory receptors are highly specialized based on what they detect. So within these specialized receptors, we can also take a look at what kinds of stimuli each type of receptor responds to. So chemoreceptors are receptors that respond to chemicals that bind to receptors on the dendrites of the neuron. So for example, when you smell something, it's because there are smell molecules in the air that enter your nose and bind to chemoreceptors in your nose, and that triggers your sense of smell. You also have chemoreceptors in your taste buds, and when certain molecules bind to those taste buds, you perceive the taste of what you're eating. Osmoreceptors respond to changes in solute concentrations in your body fluids. So we talked about electrolytes way back at the beginning of the semester, and they include our charged atoms, such as sodium, which is Na+, potassium, which is K+, and calcium, which is Ca2+. This comes into play because if you, for example, with calcium, if you don't have enough calcium in your blood, the osmoreceptors can detect that and send a signal to the bones in order to increase how much calcium is in the blood by taking it from the bones. Sodium and potassium osmoreceptors in the kidneys can detect whether the urine being formed has too much or not enough of sodium and potassium, and calcium for that matter, and it can send that signal to the brain, which responds by changing something in order to either excrete or hold on to more of those ions. Nociceptors are receptors that detect pain. And pain is just caused by chemicals that are released from tissues that are damaged. So when a tissue is damaged, it releases these chemicals which bind to the nociceptors, and then the nociceptors send that sensory information to the brain where it is perceived as pain. So pain actually has a really good function to it. As much as we don't really typically like it, it helps to alert us to something that's potentially damaging our tissues and our cells. So pain is your body's way of telling you that whatever is happening is not okay, and you should try to stop it from continuing to happen. Mechanoreceptors respond to touch, pressure, and vibration. Thermoreceptors detect changes in temperature, so heat and cold. And photoreceptors detect light energy. We can also kind of divide the different senses of the sensory systems into general senses and special senses. So the free nerve endings and the encapsulated nerve endings are going to be involved in the general senses here. So the general senses are widespread throughout the body. They're found in the skin, the walls of organs, the tendons that attach muscles to bones, and in the muscles themselves. And somatosensation is related to also these general senses, kind of these body senses. So these receptors are going to detect things like touch, pressure, vibration, itch, muscle stretch, tickle, and pain. We also have special receptors that detect proprioception and kinesthesia. And these are involved in allowing your brain to be consciously perceptive of the position of your body and the movement of your body. And then visceral senses are the senses associated with organs. So visceral should make you think of the word organ. So for example, when you eat a really big meal and your stomach stretches, and maybe you eat so much that it stretches to a point where it's uncomfortable, that would be a receptor detecting a visceral sensation of stretch and pain. The special senses have specific organs devoted to their sensation. So in the general senses, remember we said it's pretty much all over the body, in the skin, the organs, tendons, muscles, etc. But in the special senses, for example, the eye is a special structure that allows us to see. So it's involved in the special sense of vision. The nose is a specialized structure that allows for the sense of smell to be detected. The tongue allows us to detect taste, and the ear has sensory receptors for hearing and equilibrium, or what we can also call balance.